Thanks a lot for the kind introduction. I'm very happy to see also some known faces, also of the EuMIGS students who did their first year at IMIS in Osnabrück and now the second year at other EuMIGS institutions. Yeah, today I would like to share some work in progress from a research project. Next slide. And which we're currently carrying out. It's called, well, in German, the title is a little nicer, Die aktivierte Zivilgesellschaft, so the activated civil society. And it's a research project together with colleagues at BIM and at DECIM and at WZB in Berlin. And we're interested in how civil society activism for and with and by refugees has changed since 2015. And we look at the micro, meso, and macro level. And here at IMIS, we work on the micro level. So we conduct biographical interviews with activists on their so-called engagement biographies. And we as Inken Rommel, Theresa Wagner, and myself. And so I will present some of that project. Next slide, please. So when we look at activists or those who are volunteering, we see that not everybody is active to the same degree and under the same circumstances, also in the life course. And we interviewed quite some volunteers and activists who have been active since 20, 30, 40 years of their life, but also like newcomers in that field. And when we have a look at statistics and socio-demographics, we see that there are two peaks in activism, which me surprised a little bit, like adults, like parents of rather not very small kids, but pretty small kids. And then the age group 60 years and plus. And I think the parents, all of what counts is also like driving your kids to the next soccer game or in kindergarten. So that also counts as volunteerism. And the age group 60 to 75 years old has been very strongly represented in our sample. And in general, also some of those are very important in refugee support because they come with a long experience and they kind of provide some infrastructure, some knowledge. There are NGOs or informal networks that rely on their time, sometimes also money going into it. And then there are always newcomers staying for shorter or longer periods of time. And also, of course, networks and groups that are not connected to the age group 60 plus. And yeah, so we have all of them in our sample, but we saw when we were snowballing in cities where doing research, we saw that we are often referred to the older age group. And we did research in 4 cities, mid-sized cities, which is between 60,000 and 100,000 inhabitants. And we chose these cities because in the research on cities and activism, bigger cities are kind of overrepresented. So we have dozens of studies on Barcelona or Berlin or Copenhagen. And then we also have studies on rural areas, but we found the mid-sized cities quite interesting because the social networks do exist, but they are not that dense as in very rural areas, and they are not that anonymous as in really big cities. And we, in previous research, we found that some organizations are located in these mid-sized cities. Next slide, please. And when we look at the situation in Germany, to give you some context for the study, we have seen in like pre-2015 that like the numbers of volunteers and groups in the field of forced migration were really going down, and like someone like Giesemann and colleagues called them stable insider circles, and I think that fits quite well. So there were like the landscape of like self-organized migrant groups were quite big, and also of post-migrant networks and organizations. But like those really have a deep knowledge in also asylum law and the social protection framework for refugees, and how asylum procedures work. They were quite limited. But these stable insider circles have been very important for what came in 2015 and the coming years, where in Germany, like I wrote many million volunteers, and many, well, many is very blurry, so there are no real numbers, but some million were like out of a population of 80 million were really active. Like there's some guesstimate about 3 million who really had a stable not just providing support once or twice, but really committed some of their time in that field. And we had a lot of spontaneous initiatives that over time professionalized, but some like disappeared again. The profile of the volunteers was like a majority female, rather well educated in terms of formal education, and also a lot of migrants and former refugees, like who became very, very active. And we see a similar profile right nowadays also with the support from Ukraine, but a clear difference with a new group of migrants becoming active, but maybe we can talk about that later. And what we also saw that the activism in 2015 and coming years was quite creative. So forms that we have not seen before were created, and also social startups, like maybe some forms those who have been active in the stable insider circles would not have preferred as their primary form of action. Of course, there was sometimes also a mixture when there were becoming for-profit startups. So a lot of infrastructure created on a voluntary basis, for example, for supporting refugees with language courses, or with support on entering the labor market, or becoming self-employed in catering or whatever. Like they became or real startups later. Now we have a lot of refugee law clinics. They did not really exist before in Germany. And now we have a dense network of refugee law clinics at the universities. And also very, very interesting housing projects. So community housing with refugees and non-refugees, cross-generational, and yeah, very interesting landscape of organizing. Next slide, please. So in our project, we try to come up with categories, little boxes, maybe too simple, to characterize those who have been active in the last 5 to 10 years. And we see that also we have very interesting and general, like, well, we can generalize to some degree what happened in their individual life courses and engagement biographies. We have quite some also younger activists who professionalized from voluntary to full-time office, because there was like quite substantial state funding for supporting refugees in the various spheres of life. So a lot of also our students from the Migration Masters program volunteered and became professionals later on, or even during their studies. So in these years, we really had a problem that parts of our cohorts were starting full-time employment in refugee support because they were in demand, because they had not only the enthusiasm and activism, but also the skills, like for professional refugee support. So, and now we have it kind of the other way around. We have professionals who did additional work on a pro bono basis. So we also like have different degrees of informalization and formalization of voluntary work. And that changed also over time. Like also like recently we see, or recently in the past 2-3 years, we see that quite some who had been or used to be active in formalized refugee support withdrew themselves from the formal structures, but continued on an individual level their support. And when we have formal statistics, for example, of volunteerism in Germany, those are not necessarily counted any longer because it's called friendship or mentorship, informal mentorship or whatever. So we really have large numbers of volunteers who changed the form of volunteerism. And also some dropped out, which is very, very normal. And also frustrated like activists who, because in a lot of networks or support structures, like there was no burnout prevention or no monitoring or no support, like no backup for the refugees. Next slide, please. And when we look from an analytical level on what the activists like do and how they explain what they're doing and why they're doing it, we were looking at the narratives, and we're looking at what is the foundation of their volunteerism. Next slide, please. And for the EuMIGS students, I handed in like as a preparatory reading text by Helge Schwirtz and myself on different forms of solidarity and like between exclusionary and inclusionary practices. And we found a lot of transversal solidarity, we called it, which is like kind of like in the term of solidarity, like there is also an egalitarian perspective in that already. And with transversal solidarity, we meant that also like intersectional realities are included on a more conscious basis also, like with whom do I cooperate? What are the biases? What are power relations involved in activism and volunteerism? And when we look at this sample, like we like in the text, like Helge and I produced, that was from a previous project on like different forms of like how you say like flight aid, like a Fluchthilfe in German language. That is a little bit different, and also in protest against deportation. And I saw Gianni here in the auditorium as well. So we did a project also with Sieglinde Rosenberger to compare the German, the Swiss, and the Austrian case of anti-deportation protests. And we saw a lot of this transversal solidarity. But in this sample, what came to our attention is that there is a negotiation of inclusionary and exclusionary forms also of activism and voluntarism. So what is said by almost all volunteers on the first slide, like when you ask them, why do you do it? The answers are, yeah, out of humanitarian values, or like equality of all people around the world, or solidarity and empathy. So that's what everybody says. And like here we have some examples. So like the second one, for example, and I think that if you have a humane background, there is actually only one response possible, only one reaction possible, that you need those affected with solidarity. So that is very, very typical. So also to speak from your perspective and say, okay, we have a responsibility to act, a responsibility to support those who are in a situation that is not so nice. But what we saw at the same time, next slide, is that like there are also quite strong responses that more focus on drawing lines of division. And there is like in the literature, there is a lot of discussions also on humanitarian action, and also how more paternalistic perspectives come in, or how like if you care, you show you build up hierarchies of care and of like who is capable of caring. And what are the limits also of solidarity? Whom do you support and whom do you not support? Who is a deserving refugee and who is a non-deserving? And I think there are also like very clear parallels to what Shannon, and we can, I think, talk about it like with like who is a deserving undocumented or not non-deserving undocumented, and who is a deserving refugee, and how is this negotiated at the local level. And when we look at like with Norbert Elias, we also see insider and outsider relations, also between new refugees coming and older refugees, and also like what is needed for greater social cohesion in local context. So there are a lot of discussions with different concepts on these, how are inclusions and exclusion negotiated at the local level. And what we found in our data, next slide please, is that these exclusionary perspectives are often referred to by talking about Islam. And we did not ask anything about religion, not anything about Islam, not anything about Christianity, but it came up in almost all of our interviews. And like some of the volunteers have been active in like either mosque or Catholic or Protestant or other like religious networks and organizations, but of course not the majority. But in one part or the other of the interview, narratives about Islam appeared. And so in our coding, we added a category of Islam and also of religion, and and there were very, very clear patterns so far in the cities. well, we can read through some of these quotes, and then I will sort them and present, not really, it's work in progress, so work in progress typology. Second one, maybe, for example, we'll never get integration right this way. They get frustrated. I'll be honest with you, I've already observed people from the Salafis in front of the vocational school. We're pretty much invested with Salafis in this area. They pick them up there when they come out of exams or when they come out of emergencies. They already know that. And I tell you quite honestly, that's easy for them. Third one, Germany should have a great interest in ensuring that no parallel societies develop. I think that's very dangerous because then people don't integrate and they don't learn German. And the Muslim faith can also intensify in a way that I think is very problematic. So the more Muslim people somehow come into contact with Germans in such a way that their faith is put into perspective, the better. Next slide. Well, we also have more differentiated narrations about religion, like, for example, emphasizing new cultural experiences. And for me, the impressive thing about this was to experience a funeral, an Islamic funeral. First of all, the question, which cemetery allows it, and then the question, how does the whole thing work? That left a very strong impression on me. Or with the Syrian family, I now take them sailing, and they are not extreme in any way. They are neither Islamic nor anything like that, Muslims. Some of them are, but when we eat pork, maybe that's not their favorite, otherwise it's quite private. Next slide. So we found kind of 5 variations of talking about Islam, and 3 of them were like more the boundary drawing type of narratives. So either Islam as an obstacle to the integration of refugees, Muslims and the danger of isolation or parallel societies, or as a security problem or threat. And then we have the multiculturalist Islam or other cultures as exciting and enriching. And a 5th one, but very rarely, questioning the dominant constructions towards Islam. So that was quite unexpected to find in like really a lot of interviews of these boundary drawing narrations about Islam and religion, but not the Catholic or Protestant religions, only Islam. It seems that religion is quite easy, at least in the interaction, like expression to express conflict or dividing feelings. And also in these statements, we see that how powerful dominant discourses about Islam are, and not really questioning what's behind it. For example, we have a lot of quotes where they say, oh, they're also believing, they all walk into the mosque or they pray 5 times a day. Is that too much? They do not ask themselves, for example, oh, is that maybe also a coping strategy, like with divided families or in difficult situations or despair? Next slide. We see, and also as Shannon said, like it's an emotional thing. We take these expressions about religion also as an emotional like articulation of very complex and diverse interests in settings. And we very clearly see like the juxtaposition of Islam and Christianity in German volunteerism. And on the level of intergroup relations, we also we were asking ourselves, what are like the examples given for situations of tension or conflict? And in our case, it was mostly religion. and not so much gender relations or others. And you could also think of other local conflicts. So, for example, between like the radical right rising and like pro-migrant and pro-refugee activism, or restrictive policies for keeping migrants in their places or out. That has not been so much of an issue. And so we asked ourselves in the research project, how can negative or divisive emotions be addressed in activism or voluntarism? And what are the linkages between like these types of emotions and conflicts on other levels? So thanks a lot, and I'm looking forward to our discussion.